Thank you for joining our live stream. This is Jake Kurth. I'm with Leeds Forensic Systems. This is our third live stream of Leeds Helpful Tips. And in today's live stream, we're going to be going over the trace comparison microscope you see behind me. And we're going to be talking a little bit about color balance. We're also going to be going over Kohler as well. Two very important things for trace examiners. So just a quick note. This is part of we're trying to do these live streams where we go over weekly on Wednesday at 1 p.m. A topic relating to our products in forensics. Some of our earlier live streams were about our firearm comparison microscopes and some tips there. Today's live stream is going to be going over the LCT. But every week it can change. So if you have any requests or you'd like anything for us to cover and go in depth, or in some cases not very in-depth, but just talk about, please feel free to email us. You can always email me at jkurth@leedsmicro.com and we can add it to our list. So yeah, so to get started, what you have behind me is, as an LCT, and I just had a thought as a quick note, one of the advantages of doing this whole live stream through YouTube live streaming service is there's a chat window. And so if you want to add, or you have any questions and you want to make some comments and you'd like me to interact with that or answer that specifically, you can just fill out your question, and then as I'll review the questions of the live chat, and if you have any questions, I'll answer them as I see them. Okay, now moving on. So this is the LCT system. The idea of an LCT is that's for trace evidence, and a really big important part about it is color balance. So one of the things that we've done on our comparison microscope is we've been really focused on light intensity and color balance out of the box. So when an examiner has everything set up in Kohler, it will be neutral between both sides. Older microscopes, or back in the past, you'll have like one side will be slightly green tinted, one side might be slightly red tinted. And when trace examiners are doing those critical color comparisons and intensity comparisons, even a slight shift in color, especially when you take a photograph, it can be distracting for either the examination or for the presentation to the jury or through the process. So that's why we've spent a lot of time really focused on color balance and intensity balance. But what's also very important is this really only works when everything is fully colored, because that's really where everything is optically aligned as it's supposed to be, and then you'll be getting the true optical performance of your microscope. So yeah, so just jumping in a little bit, there is a couple different ways to do Kohler. What I'm going to be showing you is the way that I was taught how to do Kohler. It's a technique. I'm sure people have very strong opinions and have their own versions of it. And 1 second, guys, I just saw that my camera went out. Give me 1 minute while I get another battery. We're back. We're kind of back. But anyway, all right. So the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to load up a sample. And I'm just going to go ahead and swap over to this scene really quick. I'm going to show you what I can actually see through my microscope. And let's just go ahead and do that really quick. So this is, you can now kind of see it. We're still having that issue with that other camera. I'm just going to go ahead, hide that, and bring in our other camera. Okay, and there I am. So we're now inside of our software. So what I'm going to do, and so you can kind of see what I'm doing through the eyepieces. So the first thing with doing Kohler quickly and effectively, is you want to have something in focus. So in this case, I'm focused on our hair sample that we have loaded up on the scope. The idea is what we're going to use our field diaphragm. So the field diaphragm is located, I'm just going to grab this real quick, bring it over. The field diaphragm is located underneath the condenser. It's this portion right here. So as we close it down, what you'll see is, if everything's correctly done for Kohler, you'll actually start to see the aperture leaves come into focus. Now, ideally, truthfully, when you start this, it probably won't be as good as this. It'll be a little bit out of alignment. And so what you want to do is first find your sample, bring your sample into focus, and then go ahead and close down the field diaphragm until it's closed all the way. And now what you do is you adjust over here. This is our condenser height adjustment. We're going to go ahead and adjust that to bring that into focus. And you'll see that I'm a little off center. And so now what we're going to do is, one at a time, we're going to adjust these little control knobs. And it's kind of like an Etch-a-Sketch. This knob on the left side makes it go, I guess, diagonally to the right. And this knob on the other side makes it go the other direction. So we're going to use these little control knobs to bring it into the center of our field of view. Oops, and if you bump it, you definitely have to redo it. Hopefully nobody's getting too seasick about the shaky cam. So bring it into our center of our field of view. And now what we do is we can go ahead and just fine tune and don't bump your condenser, as I just did again, to bring it into our center of field of view. And then we can adjust the height of our condenser to try to just bring those leaves, those aperture leaves, perfectly in focus, or as good in focus as you can get. You'll see that the image here never fully resolves. There's a little bit of haze to it, and that's okay. The idea here is to just find the part that's in between. And now when we open it, we can just take our field stop just a little bit past, and now we know that we're in the middle of our field of view, and that the condenser is aligned, and that everything is at the correct place in the optical system. And that's the idea of the Kohler technique, or at least setting up Kohler technique, is to have everything aligned. Because now, what's really cool is you'll notice now the condenser's aperture is going to, because it's at the correct alignment or area and alignment, it's now going to act as it's supposed to. And that's going to give us control over the resolution and contrast balance situation. So something that's kind of interesting is with high resolution or high numerical aperture lenses, you can resolve all the detail in the world. You could see very fine details, you can see the fine striations, you can find, like for example, in this hair example, you can see all of those little pigments that are included. You can resolve them. But the downside is at very high numerical aperture, very high resolution, what ends up happening is you actually have very low contrast. It's kind of a teeter-totter. So you can either have a very high contrast image, or you can have a very high resolution image, but it's very challenging to find, to be able to actually get both at the same time. So the whole concept of the condenser and the aperture diaphragm that's loaded on it is to try to balance with that. And so there's a couple things that we can do to help with that, or use that now that we have it, or play with that teeter-totter of resolution and contrast. But the biggest one that I'm just going to show you really quick is you'll see printed on each objective, and I don't know if you can really see it, but printed on each objective, you'll have the objective in its name. So this is a U-plan fluorite from Olympus. You'll have the magnification, and then next to that, you'll have the numerical aperture of the lens. And so in this case, this numerical aperture is a 0.30 Na. And so what numerical aperture really refers to simply is the cone of light that this lens can gather. In an ideal world, to get maximum resolution, what you'd do is you'd come down to your condenser's aperture and you'd set it at 0.3 Na as well. But that's just the optimum resolution. That doesn't necessarily give you that balance between resolution and contrast. So a quick tip to do that you can use for just general imaging and work on an LCT is to go look at the objective, what's printed at 0.3, go to your condenser, and then go 25% less of that. So just drop it down a little bit. And as I adjusted that, you may have noticed that the image perhaps got a little bit more contrasty. Yeah, you can see that. And now now that I'm beyond that 25%, you'll actually start to see that you can actually get a really high contrast image. But as you keep closing that aperture's condenser down, you'll start to see that you're going to get issues with resolution. So yeah, that's one way to do it, is to look at the numerical aperture on the objective, dial it in on the aperture, and then back it off about 25%, and then that'll give you a good balance between resolution and contrast. Another way to do it is to just freehand it. So as you open your aperture all the way up, and then as you close down your aperture, you'll notice there's a dead zone, because we're closing the aperture, and the condenser's numerical aperture right now is greater than the objective, so the objective isn't even collecting. But as we keep closing down our condenser, we're going to hit a point that you'll start to see a contrast increase. And then you can just go a little bit past that, and then that'll be that good balance point. Again, what you'll notice is different technique, but similar way to get to that balance between resolution and contrast. All right, now there's another way. And if you prefer this, you can do this way too. So what we can do is, again, open our aperture all the way up. And in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to come up to an eyepiece. I have no idea if this is going to work very well. We'll find out. So what we're looking at, and I don't know how well it's clear or how easy you can see it, is we're looking at the back focal plane. And or an intermediate image plane in the microscope. Now, as I close my aperture diaphragm, what you'll start to see, you'll actually start to see an aperture close inside of the microscope. So again, wide open, closing my aperture down, we're not seeing anything because the numerical aperture of the condenser is right now is greater than the objective. But then eventually, what you'll start to see is you'll start to actually see the leaves of the aperture. And the rule of thumb here is you can close down your aperture so that 75% of the field of view is still illuminated, wide open, and you're covering 25% of this intermediate image plane with the apertures. So open up, we're closing it down, stop. And again, what you'll see is it's basically getting us to the same point of just trying to find that good balance point between resolution and contrast. So those are a couple things for Kohler, just I guess more of technique and balancing that resolution and contrast. The Kohler technique really is where we start, is we recommend, closing down the field diaphragm, getting the condenser into focus, and then centering that field diaphragm so then you're aligned. But when you do all that, the end result is that the color balance and the intensity balance of your microscope are now going to be working as it was designed. And that's pretty cool. So I've messed around with it, but let's see if we can get it side by side. Yeah, so obviously this condenser, I changed something and we're on a different. So yeah, you can get them side by side, and then you're going to have that even intensity, even color balance on both sides of the microscope. There's a little bit of work. As you can see, it's not perfectly balanced, and that's largely because of slight differences in our aperture diaphragm and where they're dialed to. That's the basics of it. Once you've got Kohler, then your color balance should work, and then there are 3 kinds of ways that I know of that you can try to play with that balance between resolution and contrast. And beyond doing Kohler, everything else in the microscope will be working as color balanced and intensity balanced. To say, thanks for bearing with us through that technical difficulty. Like I said, Murphy's Law happens, and it happened. So we're going to be looking into that and seeing why that camera feed cut out. And so I think that'll conclude today's live stream. Again, my name is Jake Kurth. I'm from Leeds. And if you have any questions about color balance, intensity balance, Kohler, anything there, we're very happy to talk to you. We're also happy to do Zoom meetings, GoToMeetings, any type of training that you or your lab may need. So until next time, thanks for watching. Jake with Leeds.